Well, hello everyone, and we're doing an experiment with this Hebrew version of the Bible displayed to us. We're going to go through Genesis, trying to adhere to some of the original structure in which it was written, trying to adhere, hopefully, to some of the original wording, but more importantly, we're trying to take out uh, what is being described, like what are the relationships that are being described, what is the symbolic structure that appears from there. And I was just talking to Gustav, and we're like, yeah, I I want to start somewhere in the Bible, and Gustav says, yeah, we can't go past Genesis because Genesis first and everything is later. And yeah, Genesis, especially the first couple chapters, they're not obvious to me at all. Um, so we want to kind of experiment with how to approach this. Like, what is the way that we can look at these things that we can be inspired. Um, so my current way I look at this is like the language is a reflection of the heavens, and therefore it's like a portal that allows us to see the configuration of the stars in heaven. Um, and it allows us to find guidance in in them. And if we can find a way to intuitively or actually with the eyes that we receive are able to see the relationships in heaven, I believe that they will aid us in our lives. They will reveal truth to us. So this is also kind of an experiment to see, okay, like how do we bring that to Earth, right? Like how do we present this to people in a manner that is digestible, I guess, and doesn't lead them astray, right? Because like that's also really dangerous. Um, so yeah, Gustav, you want to introduce this idea? Like, I guess I want to get us all up in here.
Which idea specifically?
Well, like the way that you are approaching this, your intention.
My intention. Well, I I really think that Genesis is really really difficult to work with, but also yeah, you can't move past it. And it's difficult to work with because the implications are massive. The implications and the manifestation of Genesis is all of creation, which is us and our parents, everyone else. It's way bigger than us, and also even even at the very simplest level, you have to admit that a consequence of what happens in Genesis is the whole rest of the Bible and all the events in it. And then that's like, how do you you can't it's just way bigger than us, so you can't really grasp it that firmly what happens. But we can make good observations and learn to relate to it and learn about our world that we live in Genesis. That's kind of, I guess, my intention.
Right. And so it's in my mind, it's laying a foundation, right? So first is the creation as such. Then there's, well, inside the creation, there's the population of creation, and then there's multiple populations, right? So in some sense, we're looking at the source, God, sending forth waves to fill in spaces that he creates before. And this filling in, it gets into real complexity when it reaches humans, because the humans have this weird characteristic that they take what's given to them and they do something with it, and then they create their own space. They create their own um, lineage, and these lineage are not always an extension of the will of God, right? They include the extension of the will of man, um, and yeah, so there's something there where they're still playing within the rules or the frame or the arena that has been set out by God for them to play in, right? And then they start contrasting themselves against it and against themselves, right? Because they contrast themselves against the previous generations and something is built. But we're not there yet because we're uh, going to start at Genesis 1, which doesn't really include humans. It's basically it's setting up the relationship between heaven and earth.
I think the et
Well,
is sort of like not apocryphal, but what's called it's like it's just been kept there from when the language has been really old. But the certain relationships I've heard it be related to is it has to do with the cross. So the Tao in the ancient what's it called Aramaic looks like a cross. It's like a T.
mm-hmm,
So it kind of has to do with that, and also it's uh Aleph and Tau are the first and final letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So
mm-hmm,
it's sort of like in the beginning, God created the alphabet, the Hebrew language,
mm-hmm.
the heavens and the earth. So those are
Oh,
the
wait.
relationships that I've heard it be related to.
Okay. So
Sort of
apparently,
in Hebrew Bible studies.
God is setting the stage, right? Um, and um, and yeah, the stage is heaven, right? Which is above, right? Which has the stars, um, which has the specifics, and on Earth it has the multitude. Uh, it, it it can have form, be formed, right? But it is without form and void, right? So it's not populated and it's not informed. Um, and then we have a third thing, which is darkness, right? Which is the absence of light. Um, so do we want to say anything about that?
No.
No.
Well,
Um,
you can talk about how, that there was darkness even though God had not created light, for example, or you could talk about how in this first day you have the first sort of contrast or the first binary. Um, so the act of creation was in itself a division, and that's kind of a big deal, I would say. It's like for existence to happen, you kind of have this exclusion of something else into something else.
yeah, I don't know about there's I don't know if division is the right word, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's not exactly,
that's
yeah.
presuming that there was an origin to divide from, and
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
basically what the move that I'm seeing is more like no, like I'm yeah, let's just say it's the nature of existence, right? That for example, for a material object like this cup to be, um, it has to be within something, right? So there's a quality that there's something that gives and something that receives, and they have to coexist in order for something to be. Um, so you could also say it's the outside and the inside, right? Where the heavens are outside and the earth is inside, right? But to use a really crappy word, there's no thingness yet, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Things
so
don't
so actually,
exist.
yeah, I I I I totally misspoke. So they actually aren't divided from each other. They are created together, but sort of they are orthogonal to each other, right?
Right. Or
Kind of.
parallel.
And
I
where
don't
they
know.
overlap,
No,
that's
I think
existence.
there actually
Yeah,
has
yeah,
to
yeah,
be
yeah.
like they're parallel, right? Like, because the heaven and the earth are parallel. If you look at the horizon, um, there's there's a way in which there's a mirroring or an expression, right? Or maybe the better word is like a raining from heaven, right? So there's a descension. Right? We will get into the that which descends and which ascends back up, right? But so there's two layers, right? That's maybe a better thing, right? And they're not two dimensional, but we're just using that because else we can't speak. Um, and these layers, they have communication or communion. They come together in a certain matter, right? And so it's talking about the lack of that at the start. Um, we're setting the starting conditions without the interaction. And then the face of the deep. What is the thing that you're taking from there?
I think deep has to do with quantity. It indicates a really a huge quantity. There's this idea of um there's this idea right in Peugeot's diagrams of this pyramid like sort of hierarchy that goes down, and at the top it's sort of the heavenly principle that unites, and then down below there's the materiality, and there's this idea that sort of everything at some point it stops at atoms or something, but we can split atoms, so you can go even deeper and deeper, and the deep I think is an expression of the fact that you can go really deep down into fine grainedness, into particularity and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah. So like I want to add a bunch of things. So the thing that I think with deep is also like a cave, right? So when you look at a cave, right, at the face of a cave, you have no clue what's in the cave, right? Like, because it's windy, it's bendy, you need to explore it, right? So the depth has this potential, that this hidden potential that's not available to you, right? So, and when we're talking about a face, right? Like a face is the means of presentation, right? Like someone gets presented by their face. Uh, that's true of God as well, right? And and so when we have darkness on our face, right, or we have darkness on the potential, right, it's hidden, right? Like it's not it's not even manifest, right? Like there's no ways in which it can speak, I guess, right? Like it can't communicate. So it's just like it's like it's like pre-hidden, right? It's more than hidden because it's not participating, right? Like hidden things, they kind of participate through a veil, right? Um, and And so we have this phase of the waters, um, which are the the body of the deep, I guess, right? Um, and and so the body of the deep is being moved by the Spirit of God. Um, so what I'm seeing here is like I'm thinking of wind here when we're talking about the Spirit of God, and when the wind moves over water, it starts wrinkling, right? So the wrinkling is a means of contrast, right? Because when you have a smooth surface, um, there's there's nothing to identify, right? It's all sameness. But when we start having waves, um, the sameness gets broken, but it's even more so because when you look well at a wave, it relates to what's under the wave. And we'll get to the fishes later on, but I think fishes are things that make waves, but they also they're revealed by the waves in a sense as well, right? So these waves are like the ripples that are in some sense they're advancing or they advance, or you could say like a whale coming out of the water, right? Like it first pushes away the water, right? So like it's the preceding a revelation.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think the Spirit of God moving on the face of the waters and kind of creating the ripples is that the Spirit of God is that which creates a relationship between the heaven and the chaotic chaotic deep. Because if you don't have that movement, then it's kind of static, and then you don't have any contrast over time or anything like between the two, and then I don't know if that's a relationship at all. Like I think you need to have, you know, different variation or something.
Hmm.
Uh, so if you have ripples, that's sort of like it's a relationship that changes through time.
Yeah, and that's interesting what you're saying there, right? Like so, because that's introducing the heavens back in, right? Because this is all talking about heaven, but it's like yeah, like when there's a wind, right? Like where is it coming from? Well, it's coming from above, right? It's coming from the heavens, right? So there's um there's an uproar, right, of that which is below by a call from heaven, right? Or like an inspiration from heaven. Um, and you could even do the materialistic version of this, right? Like the sun heating the earth is having us have climate, and therefore we have weather, and therefore the oceans move, like literally, right? Um, so there's a movement that we inherit from that which is in heaven, and that is the source of life, like even according to science. So um, and it's the source of change, right? It's the source of many things. It's the source of cyclical uh, time, things like that. You wanna start off with the first day?
And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So I think it's interesting that we have light created after after the heavens and the earth, because uh, maybe it's the kind of age of gnosis thinking or something, but there's like this idea of information being uh, or like information or contrast, because light kind of contrasts to darkness. Is my point, is that information feels like it should be primary in some way, but it's not. And what is light? Light is a lot of things. Light is you know distance, like you can see things at a distance. You can have knowledge. It's a revelation about the form of things. And I don't know, just the implications are really, really massive. But the division from the light, of the light from the darkness, I think is uh, is kind of a first little division which happens again and again in the uh, next verses, which I think we'll call back to. But for now, I don't have that much to say.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting what you're saying, right? It's like, well, like what is light? Well, light is just like the spirit of God is a communication, right? Like it's like light has a source and it has an object that it's acting upon. So there's they have to pre-exist the light, right? Like it's kind of necessary, and so for me, it's interesting to say, okay, when God speaks, right? Because that is preceding everything. Um, that's the heaven speaking, right? So it's like um, if you think of like a big mouth in heaven moving, right? Like what does that do? Well, it creates a spirit, right? Like it creates wind, because that's what speaking is, right? So so when God speaks, right, it means that, well, we're presuming that he's speaking from heaven here, right? That he's initiating a movement, right? Just like when I speak to you, I initiate a movement of ideas in your mind. Um, so there's an inspiration that's taken the form of light, or it's represented as light, right? So the light is something uh, that's not contrasted with form. It's not contrasted with void. It's contrasted with darkness, right? Which is interesting that at the top sentence it's the third thing that was mentioned, right? So the first thing that needs to be dispelled is darkness, right? And then there's a qualifier in there, and the qualifier is that it's good, right? So the dispelling of darkness by the heavens is um, a good thing. So why would this be good?
What this spelling of, because yeah, God doesn't say the darkness was good,
Yeah.
so that's ambiguous actually.
Well, he's dividing light from darkness, right?
So
S-
the division of light from darkness seems different than well, the relationship between light and darkness is different than between heaven and earth. Uh, because light and darkness are divided from each other, heaven and earth aren't necessarily. They were created independently, but light was kind of divided from darkness. And light and darkness are in not opposition necessarily. I'm avoiding that word, but they they are kind of non-mutually coexistent.
Yeah. So the way I'm thinking about it is, if you have a source of light, right? Like just you have a flashlight or a torch and you're walking around, right? What is lit and what is dark? Because if you have a source of light, you also have things that are lit and that are not lit at the same time, right? Like you can't like light. I don't know if you ever had like multiple light sources in a place and you wanted to have nice lighting, right? Like you have this issue when you do photography or something, right? Like you can't do it, right? Because you'll see the cross shadows, right? And then like if you have like 4 or 5 light sources, you see you see the interference of the shadows, and it would just create this pattern, right? And like you don't want this if you want to have something clearly lit, right? But the point I'm trying to make is you, adding more light is not getting rid of the shadow, right? It's just lighting the shadow differently than the things that receive both sources of light. And so it's unavoidable to have darkness. Right? Like you can't get rid of darkness, right? Like the only thing that you can do is shed light in the proper way, in the way that highlights that which is important. Um, and so I think if we go to the frame of discernment, right? Because that's what ultimately what we're talking about. I think when we're talking about light, right? Light is attention, right? You light something up, you highlight, it's that which draws attention. It's you put someone in the light, right? That's you do that to lift them up, right? To draw everybody's attention to them, and in some sense, it's like a a means to show something, right? To reveal, well, reveal, yeah. And so, yeah, there's well, I think we need to keep going to sentence 5. God called the light day, right? So I never really realized this. Apparently, I can't read. Uh, but he's making an equation, an equalization between the cyclical day, right, and light, right? So a day, right, is in some sense putting light on something, and having it fade from light, it it retreats into the night. And so if we bring this back, because I think this is ultimately uh, about attention, right? Like I think Genesis 1 is the source of attention, and like I don't know if it's our attention or it's even God's attention, or like in some sense it doesn't even matter, right? Like I think we need to use that terminology to look at this, right? So when something has its day, right? Like your day of glory or your glory days are gone, right? Like these things where the days that you are standing in the light, um, I think that's the equation that's being made, right? Like when you call light day, and I think that's setting up a way to understand the day-night cycle in later uh, usage, right? It's like, okay, no, when we're talking about a day, we're talking about the fact that we are attending to something, right? Like the fact that we are giving importance to something, right? And we can also even see light as the thing that lets plants grow, right? So when we put the plant into the light, the day is the growing of the plant or something, right? Like it's the maturation of the plant. And when it goes into darkness, right, like it's entering in a different stage, right? Like it dies. At least that form or that identity that it has dies, and it maybe gets a new identity, but a different one. Um, and then it says something really curious. I guess I want to know what you're thinking about the evening and the morning.
Not thinking much, just about how evening and morning seem to identify the boundaries between the night and the day. That's sort of something to think about, is that it's a like a second order thing, that they are identified by their second order by their relationships, I guess. So it's like you have the night and the day, and then you have between them a second order relationship emerges. Well, like a relationship emerges, and then the relationship is the boundary, which is the evening and the morning.
Hmm. So the first thing that I notice is that evening goes before morning, and that's the thing that I'm curious about. But also, if we go back to the first or the second verse, it starts with form, void, and darkness last, right? And the first thing that we're dealing with is darkness, right? So there's a sequence thing here where it's putting the first thing last. I think. I don't know why that is. Um, but yeah, like you're talking about the boundary thing, right? But if we're thinking of darkness as non-being, right, or non-existence, or non-awareness, then the evening and the morning are the places of awareness, coming into awareness and going out of awareness, right? And he connects it to the day, right? He doesn't connect evening and morning to the night. So their relationships to the coming into being, right, or the coming into awareness, and uh, the going out of awareness, right? That's yeah. So we can go to the second day. Um, shall I take this, or you wanna? And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and morning were the second day." So, um, do we know the exact meaning of this word firmament? I guess yeah, how to do this? Well, in Dutch it's like the top of a building, right? Um, so like I see it as something keeping things up. Um, you can also see it as something that's pinning things. It's a boundary, right? I guess that's the best way to look at it, right? So first we have the boundaries of morning and evening. Well, we had the water, the face of the water was also a boundary. But um, so the firmament, he he's basically yeah, he's saying there's a lot of water, right? So we're at the domain of Earth. We're not in heaven, right? And and he's this is the thing that you were talking about with heaven and earth, right? Like because he's making a splitting now, right? He didn't do it at the start. That splitting just pre-existed, but here he is splitting, right? So we have material, right? We have Earth. Um, and now we're saying no, Earth has two aspects to it. It has a top and a bottom, right? Again, a horizontal line. I don't know if that horizontal line is right at the first thing, but we're just gonna go with that, right? Um, and and there's a division between the waters. Um, so we shouldn't see this as literal water because it would flow immediately down. It we're supposed to see it as like water is if we go back to the top, right? It's without form, right? Because water is formless, and it is void, right? Because it's not being populated by things, right? So it doesn't have distinction in itself, right? Um, like the water doesn't have is not separated from itself. Like it's one. And well, actually, this is the first separation, right? Because now it says the water is no longer one, but it's two. Um,
Well, and it's also it's like a it seems to be a structural separation, not a sort of separation based on nature of the water. It's like the firmament splits the waters, and then afterwards, they kind of get uh, modified further. But it's sort of like this image of not quite emergence, not quite revolution, but it's like there's the water, and then that which is created after the water is the organizing principle, which sort of pushes the waters into configuration, into shape. The
hmm.
firmament.
Okay.
It's like imagine you have this crazy, chaotic, huge tribe or country, and then some guy shows up, and then he sort of like organizes the country into this young lad who's sort of blessed by God or whatever comes and divides the country into two regions or five regions, but kind of gives it a structure. Like that's different than the country was structured and then it sort of evolved or developed. I don't know. There's like a directionality difference, I think.
Yeah. So you're talking about the emanation, right? So there's um, a different way of saying this, right? Because that's where I want to go, right? It's like a standard, right? So because like in my mind, like I don't think it says it here, right? But like I see it more as like a tent, right? So let's just say uh we have the tent laying flat on the floor, right? So now it's part of the floor. Um and and it's um okay. So if we look at at the ground and the air above the ground as the water, right? But but they're in harmony, right? Like there's no movement, right? There's no distinction, right? They're just one body, right? And when I put up the tent, right? Now uh, I'm disturbing the equilibrium that was there, right? Because I'm moving up the air, right? And so I'm changing the nature of the air, and I'm extending uh, the domain of the ground up into the air, right? Because like the tent becomes an establishment of the ground. It's like a tower or a mini mountain, right? And so you could see the covering of the tent, right? Because like the tent is not solid, right? The covering of the tent is um, is the firmament, right? Like it's an artificial boundary between that which is above and that which is below, and it's increasing the domain of the below. But like we don't want to talk in increases. We want to talk in this idea that creating this distinction, right, and creating this space is now also assigning an identity to that which is above and that which is below, right? So the fact that we have this tent, right, the boundary of the tent, right, which is the firmament, is now defining that there's an above and then that there's a below. And in the definition, God named that which is above heaven with a capital H here. Um, so he's basically saying in the material realm, we're going to have influences that are above you that are going to affect the things that are below them. And I created the boundary at some point. And like it doesn't matter where that boundary is, it just matters that it exists, right? And now we have two waters, right? Like one undefined part at top, and we have one undefined the part at bottom, and they communicate.
What do you think it means that the firmament being called heaven is that the same heaven as in verse 1?
No, I think heaven is the definition of the masculine. I guess like that's what it is, right?
Okay.
It's it's the masculine at the cosmic scale. It's the bringer of things, right? It's the mover, right? So like so basically another way to talk about it, right? It's like okay, we have that which moves, right? Which is where God is housed, right? In the heavens, right? And then we have that which is subject to that movement, right? So that's the first step, right? And then when we start focusing on that which is subject to the movement, right? There's speaking onto it, right? And now we have two parts again, right? So if we're talking about water again, right? So let's just say like the whole earth is water, right? So there's a surface of the water, right, which is relating to heaven where God lives, right? And that surface of the water is receiving things, right? Like it's receiving mutations. And then there's the depths of the water, right? Which is where things are populated at some point, right? They're going to be populated because they're not populated yet. They don't have direct connection with what's happening above. No, it's mediated by the surface, right? So in some sense, what I think this firmament is like, okay, no, we have the boundary, right? The surface of the waters where God's spirit is moving upon the face, right? That surface um, is speaking towards the rest of the water, right? But like I don't know if you ever spoke in water, right? Or you ever had light hit water. It refracts, right? Like it changes the wavelength, right? So there's a distortion of the clarity of speaking. Uh, and that's why it's the second heavens, right? It's an image of the heavens. It's not the actual heavens. No, it's a mediated version. And now we can also see, right? Like why is it a covering? Well, because because like it has to be, right? Because the covering comes from the fact that it's a mediation, right? And everything gets translated through that covering because we don't have direct access because we're not on the surface. And we can't be, right? Like it's impossible for us to be on the surface. You want to add anything?
No,
So let's see if my idea of evening and morning um, is helpful here. So so the evening is maybe the closing off of that which was before, right? That might explain why the evening precedes the morning, right? So I see the morning also as like an era, right? It's like, okay, like this was not, right? And from now on, this is, right? Like this day, right? This reality, right? Or this um, foundational principle. Maybe that's a better way, right? Like we're now living under this foundational principle because it's established by God, right? So previously it wasn't established, but now it is established, right? And because we've established it, we can rely upon it, right? Just like the covenants are things that are established, right? And then they're presumed, right? And in the presumption, a new thing can occur, right? Like new potential can manifest, and it's requiring the previous establishment in order to even be. So you wanna go to the third day?
and God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. Well, that's a
That's
big
a
one.
yes.
It's it's it, it's also interesting that you have these two different kinds of operations happen. So you have the operation of the sea and the land, and then you have the second operation, which is the plant stuff. And that makes me think that they're probably fractally kind of related.
Yeah. So
Because previously we didn't have two things happening at once.
yes, right. So I think it's important to see, right? Like if we're going back to the top, right? So the void, right? Uh, the firmament, in some sense, is removing the void, right? Because we got two now, right? Is not one, it's two. We got the realm of the heaven, right? Not the heavens, but heaven, and we got the waters below, all right? And so it's no longer empty because there's something you're looking at, right? Like you're no longer looking at emptiness, right? Because you're looking at distinction. And now we're going to deal with the form, right? We're like, okay, we're going to inform that which is below the second heavens. They're going to receive formation. So I think we might look at this as the establishment of form. And then it's like, okay, so we have waters, right, which is the formless, right? And he says the formless is one, right? Because that's what gathering means, right? It's like, okay, we're going to unify the formless, right? And then there's something else, right? And it appears, right? So now I don't know how it appears, right? Like I don't know if it's relevant, but the fact if we're taking the perspective of okay, we're having something that isn't distinguishable, right? Something appears in our vision, right? Like if we look at something, like we start recognizing things, a pattern or whatever, right? A, a, a mutation, right? Like oh, like there's something really bright and the rest is dark. Okay, well now I recognize that there's bright and not bright, right? And so I know something about what's bright, right? There's knowledge uh, that comes to me from what is bright, and all the other stuff, right, is not that, right? Like I don't know what it is, right, but it's not that, and I think that's the way that we should look at this, right? Like this dry land is the appearance of something that has solidity, right? That this, it has its own being, right? Like it has form, right? And so the form appears, right? And the form is distinct from all the things that don't have form, which is the waters, right? And
Yeah, and there's a parallel there with the light, right? Is that the light contrasts with the darkness, and you see the darkness by that which you don't see, right? In a way, and but in this sense, it seems to be sort of it's like a it's like an inversion or something where you know in like the dry land is the one that is like light or the one that is sort of solid and emanates light more than the water. Like the water is well, kind of, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
no,
yeah.
the dry land is that which like we have to see, right? Like I think I was correct with this framing, right? Where we're talking about an image, right, or a fractal layer below the first heaven and earth, right? So what are we doing here, right? We're applying the light that is refracted through heaven on earth, right? So like what happens when the light shines upon earth, right? Because there wasn't an earth to shine upon. No, there was the surface of the water to shine upon, and now under the water it's shining upon earth, right? And so what happens when it shines upon earth? It reveals, right? Like the light is given body, right? It's given a target, and that's the dry land, right? The thing that the light shines upon is the dry land, right? So we're no longer talking about an image, right? We're talking about the manifestation of the light at this point. And I think then we're going to have a, a reoccurrence of the second day as well later on. Um, so and God called the dry land earth, right? So now we're having a second earth as well, right? There's not only a second heavens, there's a second earth. And so what is it saying, right? Like, well, it's saying that the earth is different from the waters because it's revealed, right, by the light, and it's workable, right? Like now it, there's a form that it can hold, right? Unlike the waters, right? So there's something that can receive and something that can't receive or doesn't receive or whatever. Um, and the gathering
And
of the
I
waters he
yeah
called seas, right? So
yeah,
now
and I think it's yeah, it's significant that the gathering of the waters below is called the seas because I think it implies that the waters below are salty and the waters above are fresh water. And so all the fresh water we receive is sort of the grace of something trickling down, trickling through, and then that's that which creates life.
hmm, yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, so the first thing I would say is he's distinguishing right? The waters from the other waters, right? So he's renaming it, and yeah, like your point about salt is interesting. Uh, yeah, I think that is correct, right? Because it's the leftover, right? And like what do you do when you salt the earth, right? Like when you salt the earth, you can't grow crops anymore, right? So the salt has something with to do with that, right? Or the inability to have life, right? Um, um, yeah, and I also think that it also says something about the relationship with these seas and the earth that is different than the waters in heaven or something, right? There's a mutation in quality that we're talking about here, um, and so he saw that it was good, and then he's speaking the second time, right? And I think that's an image or an echo. Maybe that's the better word. It's an echo of the second day. Because yeah, that sounds right. Because if you speak, well, it doesn't even matter. Um, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed. So, do you want to go into grass and what grass is?
Well, grass is emergent. It comes like the green parts sort of come from below to up. It's also sort of dark in the sense that it can hide lots of stuff, lots of bugs and snakes and things like that. It's not well. You, I think you kind of have to see grass in contrast to the tree, right? It's like all these relationships only exist in the not only, but they exist in the comparison, in the contrast, in the relationship. So the grass exists in relation to the tree. Otherwise, they're all just plants or something. So in the contrast, the tree is that which lives long, the grass lives a short life. The tree is really big, the
Mm.
grass is really small and surrounds the tree. The tree is a focal point, the grass is not the focal point. And a whole bunch of other comparisons that can be made.
So
Like lots of herbivores, for example, can only eat grass. They can't really eat trees, for example.
yes. Well, we'll get into
That's
this,
later.
right?
That's
Uh,
later. That's later.
that's later, but I think we got at a you inspired something in me because I'm seeing the pattern unfold in ways I haven't before. And what you're saying is the grass is dark, right? But I want to point out a bunch of things, right? Like we're in this fractal thing, right? So what happened on the second day? Well, the firmament was made, right? So what's happening here? He's establishing a new firmament upon the earth, right? So what's the heavens? The heavens is the trees, right? They're the skyline, right? They're the things that are above human existence, right? They, like you said, they I like the permanence thing, right? So trees are things that outlast the lifetime of a man, for example. Often there's a bunch of things happening with trees. Um, they shelter us from the heavens, right? By having shade, things like that, right? Um, and they are the bearers of seasons, right? Like they're like they give different times than day and night, right? Uh, so there's a bunch of things that the trees do that we orient our lives by, right? Like they just they are their own heavens literally in their manifestation as well. And grass less so, right? Like grass has more like a permanent existence in the sense that like there's just multitudes, and like yeah, they might be longer or shorter or whatever, right? But the, it's like the sea, right? Like it's like the waters. It's like the hidden potential, right? You said, well, there's creepy crawly things in there. Yeah, and the creepy crawly things in the grass are hidden by the grass, right? The grass is below us. We walk over it, us, right? Like it holds us. And yeah, there's it has a completely different quality, right? And things things emerge from the grass. It means that they don't emerge from the sky, right? Like where's the danger? Well, the danger is not above in general, right? Unless it's in the form of a bird, right? Like like the danger is from below. Like the obvious example is a snake, right? But like even lions or whatever, like they're walking in the grass. They're hidden in the grass even. Um, so we haven't talked about the quality of seed, right? So grass has seeds. So seeds are something that comes from the grass that produces more grass, but also has different purposes, right?
I think
So
I think I think the I think the relationship between the plant and the seed of the plant is something like the relationship between day and night, because you have this sort of like growth and then you have a contraction, growth and contraction, where
no,
you
I like
and
that.
things change through this, and it's kind of the same through the year as well, that you have like an annual plant that kind of grows up and then it contracts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is definitely true. There's a day and night aspect there as well. Um, but well, what was the thing that I was gonna say? It's like um, it's also also in some sense it's separating uh the land from the waters as well, right? Because like with seeds you can do things, right? So they're a new land, while the grass itself you can't really do things with it. So
Yeah,
so there's a maturation there or something like where it participates in new creation, the seed. And that's like you said, right? Like the seed can participate in new creation where it goes back into the ground, but it can also be refined into flour or whatever, or in animal feed, stuff like that. Um, and to go to the other side, so what is the distinction between an apple and a seed from a grass? Well, it's the fruit, right? Like it's the like because it has seeds, right? But the seeds are clothed, right? And the thing I look at it is they're clothed in glory, right? Because there's something there uh, well, which calls to the birds, for example, right? Like it actually attracts animals. It attracts attention to go back to the light, right? So yeah, like it's like a new form of light that's being brought into the world. This fruit is like, oh look, like special taste, right? Like you can also say, well, oh it's the light of the nose, right? Because it's like the flowers or whatever, right? And it's also the light of the taste, right? The, like both of these senses are in some sense included. So you can also look at the third day where there's a connection to feeding, right? Because that's also the sense of taste, right? Um, yeah. Um, so it's also talking about herbs. Um, The seed was in itself after its kind. So there's something when we're talking about seeds where the seed is a representation of the persistence through day and night.
Mhm.
Um, and that persistence through day and night is also deemed good there. Okay, we want to go to day 4 or
Yeah. Mm, yeah, let's move on.
it's
I
but
was I
but
was
like
I
I'm
was just thinking back to the parallels between, yeah, the dry land and the water and the sea and the
yeah.
yeah
So
and
like
the
I think we've dealt with this, right?
yeah.
Um, and yeah, now I'm curious about what's going to happen next because like my mind can't hold it at once. Um, is it me? Okay.
Yeah,
And
you can.
God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide day from night, and let there be let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, and the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from darkness. And God saw it was good, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Okay, so the first thing that stands out to me is we're, um, I was going to say diffusing, right? But we're creating different qualities of light. Um, so yeah, maybe you wanna see what you see, because I'm trying to get my my head around it a little bit.
Well, it's you have this fractal relationship again where God creates different kinds of lights. So first of all, he creates small lights, which are the stars, and then he makes the great lights. Uh, and then within the great lights, you have the the sun and the moon.
Hmm.
That's how I see it anyway.
Okay, so I think we want to go back to day 1, right? So this is like a clarification of day 1, right? It's like in some sense, right? Like the light is shining on the face of the waters, right? And now the face of the waters is doing something, and it's putting it in the second heaven, right? The one that we see, and it gets all of these qualities, right? Are you in agreement with that part?
Yeah.
Right. So because maybe that's the way we should look at it, right? Because the earth is filled, right? There's a bunch of things that now have form. Uh, the light, when reaching those things, does different things. Um, and so when we're starting to read here, it says, "Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years," right? So we're starting with purpose, right? And then from the purpose, we get the designation of the lights, right? Like what are the lights that are fulfilling those purposes? More so than the other way around, right? So I think we want to look at these purposes. So what is this? What is a sign? Um, like I think the way we should look at a sign is as the separations of the seas from the earth, right? Like that's what a sign is. Like the sign is like the invitation, right? It's like the key, uh, the call to attention, right? That allows light to be shown on something, right? So that's what I think a sign is. And then what is a season? Um, well, that's a good question. So season is not a day, right? And seasons have to do with life cycles, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Are they using capital days in before? No, it's not. So what is a season? A season is four, right? And a season has to do with years. So a year is progression, right? I think like a year has to do with trees, and a season has to do with the filling of the tree. Maybe that's the better way to look at it. Because the way to depict a season is by depicting a tree, right?
Yep.
And to go back to the idea of a year on a tree, right? They have the rings in a tree as well, right? That depict the years, how old they are, right? So there's the year is the sustainment throughout seasons or something, right? Um, and so it's a renewal. Okay, it's a renewal without death. That's what a year is, right? Or renewal without the loss of identity.
Maybe. Look, I'm just confused about one thing. So it says the greater light, which is the sun, I think, to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. That's the moon. And
Mm-hmm.
he made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Are those the stars that are being put to rule over the day and the night?
Yeah. So the stars are like a permanent fixture, right? And they persist through day and night, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's to go back, right? So what is a day? Well, a day is a certain quality of a cycle, right? Or a beginning and an end. That's what it is. A day is a beginning and an end of an identity, right? And um, and so in the beginning and the end of an identity, the light that rules that is the sun, right? Like that's just who their purpose. The purpose of the identity is the sun. and uh, then within that sun, right? Like just having a purpose isn't enough, right? Because how do you navigate by just the sun, right? You navigate by the stars, right? In relation to the sun, or no, no, no. You 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 use the sun to track time, right? That's what you do, right? Because it shows you the time of day, right? And the stars, they have more permanence to them, right? They don't move as fast as the sun. Like the sun is going nuts. Like it just like keeps on going crazy, right? And the moon is even more insane. Like I don't even know how to think of the moon, right? Because the moon is even disappearing and appearing, and like it has a bunch of other interactions, right? Um, so so the sun is in some sense it's not a reliable guide, right? Like you don't want to build uh, your civilization on the basis of the sun.
Well, you have no other option actually, but okay.
No. You do it in union with the sun. You don't base it on the sun, right? Because the sun is cyclical change, right? But the stars are eternal, right? They don't change, or if they change like really slowly and predictably, right? And so, if you want to set a course that is eternal, then if you want to set a course that is eternal, then you want to have this what do you call it? This eternal guides. Does that make sense?
And yeah, it does, and I think it also contrasts really nicely with the grass and the trees, where the grass is really multiple and the tree is not multiple, and yet the grass is the one that doesn't. It's the tree persists, but in this case, it's the stars that persist.
Right. And yeah, like maybe you wanna like share what that shows you, like what are you thinking about when you're talking about seasons? What are you thinking about when you're talking about um a year, right? Like what do they mean to you?
To me, they sort of show a variation in life. Like you have happy times and sad times, and you're just gonna have that. And also that it's sort of a shared thing because the sun is above everyone in the world, and the seasons in general are also pretty much shared by everyone.
Hmm.
And I think that's what that means to me.
Okay. So they're also in relationship to the grass and the trees, right? Because that's what's on Earth right now. Um, so what's like I guess maybe we want to see like what's the distinction between the seasons affecting grass and the seasons affecting trees, right? Like in some sense the grass just gets ripped, right? Like when I think of it, right? Like um a tree withstands, right? And um the grass goes away and comes back or something, right? So the grass is like day and night in 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 the sense of how to say it. it doesn't have permanence. That's what I'm trying to get at, right? So this and just like the sun doesn't have permanence, right? Like it has permanence in a different manner, right? Like it has permanence is in that it's you can't stop the sun from coming up, just like you can't stop the grass from repopulating the fields.
Mm.
But the permanence is in in that it's gonna move, right? Like the permanence is in the movement because I'm gonna have to bring in like cyclical time and the establishment of space, right? Because because I think the grass is is the establishment of a force of change, right? So you might have one time you might have this type of grass, and then the other time you have this other type of grass, right? Because like it gets completely replaced. Like that's not the case for trees, right? Like you plant a vineyard, right? And you're gonna have wine for consecutive years. Um, and and so maybe that connects to the moon and the night, like that kind of makes sense, right? So then the moon would rule the grass, it would rule emergence, right? Like that kind of makes sense also with the werewolf thing and like the women like their monthly cycle, right? Like there's a
I'm not sure.
there's a
I think there's too many connections. I think we're I think you're missing something. But,
okay.
uh,
Yeah, well,
I feel like yeah,
I'm go
I'm also really overwhelmed cognitively. Uh,
yeah.
I'm
Well,
kind of
this is
useless to
something
be
we need
honest.
to digest as well, right? I'm planning to like try and work this out and present in a better manner, right? And like I hope people in the comments will assist us in our struggle, our struggle with God. But but I think we're getting a lot of fruitful things out of it, and maybe we shouldn't linger here too long. Maybe that's the best way to do it, right? It's like okay, no, like we'll just see what's there to be shown and like not read into it more than we should, because that's probably a sin. Um, and like I'm sure that the connections that I just mentioned are there, right? But they're there in a different direction, right? Like they're inappropriate right now. That's what I'm thinking, and I think that's the thing you picked up. It's like, okay, yeah, you're over connecting. You're outside of the frame of creation. I guess that's the thing. Um, so yeah, I guess we got a good sense of what it is. Although I don't feel like we got to the depth of it. To reference back to the depth. You want to do day five?
No, I think we should end it. Like I'm just too cognitively
We should end it.
overwhelmed. Honestly, I'm just not going to be able
Yeah,
to
well, no,
anymore.
that's good. That's good. Then we can do like a recap on the next time where we talk. Um, so yeah, how do you feel about what we did? Like, do you feel
I
like we
think it was
revealed
really
things?
helpful because I'm really happy and I'm grateful we were able to do this because, and I think we should keep doing it. Not today, but we should keep doing it because I do like the idea of how you kind of go through the stages of the days of creation, and then each of them is sort of a play on the previous ones, and then it kind of becomes a play on a play, and it's really complex, really complex. But I think we got some of the earlier connections, you know, the parallels, the symbolic relationships. And that's what I think we wanted to do. So I'm
Yeah.
happy.
So yeah, I'm I'm actually really excited, right? Because like I kind of know what a seed is, and I kind of know what these things are, right? And these things are mentioned later in the Bible, right? I'm really excited to see how this light, right, is shedding light throughout the Bible, right? because that's ultimately, I think, the way in which what we're doing is valuable, right? It's like, okay, we kind of see these relationships, right? And we see these qualities. It's like, okay, but that's the qualities that are important, the qualities that we're called to attend to when we're reading the Bible, because they're in this foundation, right? So when we're talking about seeds, right? Like, are they in fruits or are they in grains, right? Like like what is the directionality, right? Like, what is their relationship to heaven and earth, right? Things like that. When people talk about days, right? Like what does 3 days mean, for example, right? Like, is this referencing to the third day of creation? Is like is there a specific meaning there, or does it just mean 3 cycles? And is there some specific meaning to the having of 3 cycles, or is that the same as day three, right? Because that might actually be true, right? And so, like, what is day three? It's like a fulfillment, right? Like, it's the filling out, the fleshing out of earth, right? Of the waters of earth that we started with. Um, and so there's in some sense, I think, if we look at day four, right, it's like a re-injection, right? Like like there was I like the thing about kickstarting, right? Like, you got to give something like a impulse, right? And then it starts rolling out, right? And then it reaches its end, right? Like, it reaches the end of the day, right? And in day three, there's some, in some sense, there's an end, right? It's like, okay, like, we got all these things, right? Now we got to give it a kick again, right? And when we give it a second kick, all of these things like trees and grass, they're they're gonna sustain something new, right? There's a new, because they're going to sustain life, right? Like, they themselves aren't really life, right? They're the consequence of things being there, right? But when the cycles start cycling, right? Like, we're starting to talk about now, we're going to see something different, right? We're going to see um, a complex ecosystem instead of static uh, staticity, right? And I also think what's happening is we're trying to find language to talk about this, right? And, like, I just, like, fell on my face at the start of the recording, which is really funny. Uh, with uh, with yeah, like, misestablishing my relationship, right? And it's important to see that the way that we give meaning to these words can capture us in a certain relationship to the text, right? And it's like, okay, like, what way do we want to be captured, right? Like, what was the purpose of the writers of these texts, right? Like, what were they calling out? And then what does it allow us to do, right? Because in some sense, that's also what it's talking about, right? It's like talking about affordances, right? Like, oh, if you establish this, right, then these things are possible. If you establish this, these things are possible, right? And it's this fractal possibility uh, that gets created, right? But it also, at the same time, connects us to that which allows the things to be, right? Because all of these previous establishments, right, we have to be grateful for them. Like, we have to show reverence to that they're necessary for the continuing steps. And if we don't honor that properly, we're going to build our house on sand, right, instead of on a rock. And And like now I'm connecting sand to salt, right? It's like sand is the salt of the earth. Anyway, like um now I'm gonna get too many connections. So yeah, like eventually, at least this is my personal ambition. Like I wanna create like a educational framework or something to present to people, and anybody who's interested in cooperating, uh, maybe even continuing this in like a live stream format or whatever. Um, we're all open for suggestions. You want to add anything, Gustav?
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, like we we gotta go slow, I guess, because that's the only way. Um, yeah. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time.